What are the best science fiction movies from 2001 to 2010? This list is an amazing list. This is an explosion of great movies in this period. Let me give you my top 10, and let's see what your top 10 is coming up next. I ended my last video on the science fiction movies of the 1990s saying that the 1990s movies basically are conspiracy-filled paranoid thrillers. You get up to the year 2001, especially with the 9/11 event, and I think things change, albeit a little bit slowly. It takes a couple of years after 2001, but boy, do you get a lot of disaster movies along with the paranoid conspiracy thrillers. Most of the movies that we're going to talk about here, I'm going to name, are disaster movies, I think having to do with the vibe of 9/11. A lot of apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic movies where they be zombies, end of the world scenarios, and that sort of thing come up here. One note here, this list, it's a very difficult list to rank. There's just so many really good movies here. So what I did, other than technical excellence, great storylines, great characters, I really whittled this top 10 list down to which movies do I just want to rewatch or would I prefer to rewatch. So in a sense, the order is based on my own preferences. Forgive me for that, but I want this list to be recommendations for you. If you haven't seen these movies, you should probably pursue them. Number 10 is a relatively unknown movie, I think, but from one of my favorite actors, Sam Rockwell, who starred in this sort of quirky but very dark science fiction movie, Moon.
Sam, can I ask how it happened?
I told you I saw something on TV and I spilled boiling water on my hand.
You saw something on TV?
Yeah, I saw something on TV that distracted me. Is there something wrong with that, Gertie?
Sam, you said it was the TV that distracted you, but when I came in, the TV wasn't on. Perhaps you were imagining things.
Yeah, you think too much, pal. Get laid. I'm gonna go back to work.
Moon is a Robinson Crusoe story. Boy, there are a lot of Robinson Crusoe stories in science fiction. A man on the moon base. He's running the moon base with his robot voiced by Kevin Spacey. And what's he there for? Why is he there? We're going to figure this out over time. This is, again, a conspiracy-filled paranoid thriller with a lot of humor because you got Sam Rockwell with the Kevin Spacey voice. But I recommend this one. I think you'll really like it if you like Rockwell. That's the only reason to watch this in a way, but I love the sci-fi trappings in this as well, especially the robot. Number 9 may not be science fiction. Go ahead and pick on me in the comments. This is a fantasy movie, but I always think of this as science fiction. It's almost impossible to happen, almost improbable, but maybe there's a tiny sliver of probability. Whatever, it's Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy II.
Johann Kraus.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds German.
He's the top man in
Ectoplasmic.
Yes, thank you. Ectoplasmic research comes highly recommended by our European liaison.
Johann Kraus.
Liaison, I love that word, don't you? It's so hoity-toity.
I don't like German.
Damen und Herren, Johann Kraus, at your service.
I like him.
I like Hellboy a lot. Hellboy 2 is a feast for the eyes, and one reason, the 2000s on are great science fiction fare. A lot of these directors grew up watching Star Wars, Star Trek, and the movies of the 1980s. Go see my video on that. And now they're sort of repeating, aping, and doing their own thing with the Star Wars vibe. Del Toro does that so well here. I just love looking at this movie, listening to it. I always have. Watched it in the theater, rewatched it on Blu-ray. It's just fun movie to watch. So for that reason alone, I'm putting it at number 9 because I want to rewatch it. Number 8 is a heady, trippy thriller from one director I struggle with, but I actually really like all of his movies, Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain. The Fountain is controversial. A lot of critics don't like it, don't think it makes sense. It intercuts 3 storylines, one from the 15th or 16th century, one from the modern day, one from the science fiction future. What's the story about? It's basically a love story, but it's a very trippy, spiritual, as Aronofsky's movies are, enterprise. Love the Hugh Jackman performance here and all the other performances. And my wife really likes this movie, of all things. She usually doesn't like these. So The Fountain, I recommend trying it with your spouse or lover. Number 8 is one of my favorites. I just love to laugh. Good comedies are hard to come by. Idiocracy.
You got hepatitis. Oh, is someone not feeling well? Your illness is very important to us.
Mike Judge is very funny. This is a schlocky movie, a B movie. However, it's premised that a man with 100 IQ accidentally goes into the future via a time capsule and wakes up the smartest man in the world in a dumb future world. Well, this just hasn't really been done in movies at all. So I like that premise, and it's just very funny. It's prescient about American politics, maybe American culture in general, consumer culture in particular. I always get a kick out of all the sights and sounds in this movie, so for that reason, Idiocracy is here at number 7. Number 6 is a fun movie by another director who has worked a lot in science fiction in the last 20 years, Neil Blomkamp's District 9.
Is that tear gas?
No, it's cat food! It's cat food, I just distract them!
Oh, that's a pity, because you know, this is a nice cat food, you know.
Blomkamp is from South Africa, thus people have seen District 9 as a sort of moral or political tale about South Africa, whether it's apartheid or the present day. It's in documentary or even mockumentary form, aliens living in South Africa. I won't go too much into the plot, although I think this is a very thoughtful movie once you start to analyze it, not just for its political allegories, but its social and moral ideas. And it's just a fun watch and rewatch, sad and poignant, and yet another one of these disaster movies. So many of them on this list. And speaking of disaster movies, number 5, well, the Kids Fair, the animated fair, the Pixar Fair even got into this. It's WALL-E. I've studied WALL-E, taught it in a college course. I really admire it for a lot of reasons. One, it's a post-apocalyptic animated musical. What movie in movie history has combined those 3 genres or tones? None. WALL-E does it. It's an allegory about what kind of technology we should use. Do we need technology or not to be fully human? Should we be fully human, go back to life on the ground with green stuff, or live in a technological environment? These are actually basic science fiction ideas that are being worked out for kids, but this is a movie for adults. Really appreciate the simplicity, the wonder of this movie, WALL-E. It's always a great rewatch. Number 4 is a heady, cerebral movie. This is the label for this kind of movie from this director. First a screenwriter, Charlie Kaufman, turned director. Here he wrote the movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
I'm just exactly where I want to be. Clem? I want to call it off.
Can you hear me? I don't want this anymore. I want to call it off.
Great turn by Jim Carrey in this movie, and his world is falling apart, and it's visualized very well in this movie. So many concerns here from Kaufman, the lack of identity, the loss of memory, which is a loss of sense of self, even the sense of self and identity. Who am I in this crazy world where nothing may mean anything, there may be no meaning? And this is a wonderful sort of love story, sort of like The Fountain, that's playing with science fiction ideas, but at its heart, maybe its kernel is a romance. So I definitely recommend this movie to you. Rewatching it's great. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Up at number 3, you probably don't think of this as a science fiction movie. I'm not sure it's labeled this way, but like my pick earlier with Hellboy II, this movie from Christopher Nolan, this does count as science fiction in my view because it's possible. It may be about what might happen or what could happen. So, The Dark Knight. Dark Knight is obsessed with the use of technology to control populations, to save populations from the criminal aspects. Of course, that's the basis of the Batman myth, wherever it's found. And Batman is a tech geek and an inventor. So for that reason, it's definitely sort of a scientist applying technology to save the world sort of story. But also the questions post 9/11 with the Patriot Act, whether governments or corporations should be able to spy and know a lot about citizens. The Dark Knight really foregrounds that. Also watch Batman Begins, very similar, but I think this was more of a science fiction movie, The Dark Knight is, so number 3. Number 2 is a great movie. I think it's a mess of a movie, lots of tones, lots of different feels, lots of different messages. So people might come to this movie and find it to be a total mess. Actually, I like that aspect of it. It's The Host. The Host has a cool sort of mutated fish story. Chemicals dumped in a river created this mutant fish in South Korea in the Han River. Thus, it's a tale about pollution. It's a tale about viruses, about lost families. It's about a father who has a mother of his children gone. There's so many things that this movie is about. It's hard to sort of, land on one thing. But I always enjoy the mixed tones in this movie. I think it actually works. Some of Hong Ju's other movies I don't like as much for this, but this one is quite thoughtful. So The Host. And number 2, I'm going to have to do a video analyzing this movie. It's great. I got to say some honorable mentions here, and there are so many you would put them in your top 10, all right? So let's go. 9, a good animated movie worth watching with older children. Time Crimes, a good time travel movie from Spain. Primer, another good time travel movie, low-budget indie movie from Shane Carruth. Minority Report, big blockbuster movie from Steven Spielberg with Tom Cruise. I Am Legend, another big blockbuster movie with Will Smith. And note how many of these movies are disaster, Last Man on Earth sorts of movies. You got Avatar, you got the Star Wars trilogy. I mean, Star Wars 2 is great, isn't it? No. 28 Days Later from Danny Boyle, a zombie apocalypse movie. Iron Man, the beginning of the Marvel and DC franchises really here, with the X-Men franchises going as well in this period. And Cloverfield from Matt Reeves in his first movie, and he becomes a worthwhile science fiction director. There's Godzilla movies, there's all kinds of interesting monster movies, zombie movies from this period. So what movies would you put here in your honorable mention or your top 10? Number 1 may not be as great as I think it is, but visually and sonically, it's amazing. I love to look at this movie, not just at what's in the foreground or what's in focus, but what's in the background. The wandering camera, the long takes. This movie is a great, great feast for the eyes. It is Children of Men.
They are illegal immigrants. To hire, feed, or shelter illegal immigrants is a crime. Take them. Report all.
Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men seems to be about, I think, demographic decline in the world. In Europe, Japan maybe as well. Populations aren't replacing themselves. The premise, of course, in this movie is that there's no more children having been born in the last 20 years or so. So everybody's dying off. People are committing suicide willfully. Governments are crazy and insane, and things have run amok in the world. And so here you have the focus on England as the last bastion of hope, which you watch this movie and it's totally untrue. And the movie, even through its plot, basically says that's untrue. I love the look of this movie as we follow this character wandering around the world through portals. There's a lot of video game aspects to this one. And, the long single takes, wandering through huge sets with some CGI, becomes a staple of Cuarón and Inarritu and other directors like this, and really influences, later science fiction like Gravity from Cuarón. So Children of Men, I've studied this, I've taught this in a college course. That's one reason why I put it up here, is that in thinking about it, looking at how it's made and how it's making meaning from what it's doing, I think this is quite a good movie, even if its premise is preposterous, which I think it totally is. It's sort of a fantasy movie, but I just love the look of this movie. So that reason, it's number 1. Let us know in the comments what you think of this list and what you would put in your top 10. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you. Have a great day.